This is an excerpt from a longer work in progress. It's about a famous monster, a fish that terrorizes a pond. And this is how this part I'm going to read is about how the fish came into being. Issuing from the bank along the pond, there is a tunnel of corrugated iron. Bolts bearing hexagonal heads bounded along a seam. The grooves within, measured apart in terrible regularity, spiraled off into the darkness. In the winter and fall, the tunnel's mouth hung agape above the water. In the spring and summer, it hid beneath the surface. The tortoise did not go there, nor the toads. Not frogs, snakes, or fish. They swam in wide arcs around the muddy gray plume that fanned out from the tunnel's mouth. This was the drainage pipe. There was a gully in a field. The drainage pipe nosed out into the middle of the gully's floor. In the spring, when the water was high, the gully contained a muskrat that swam up and down the ditch looking for cattails. During the summer, under the dominion of flies, the gully became a muddy trickle. This was the irrigation ditch. There was a water hole full of strange-smelling liquids. They ran down into the hole from a factory on a hill. The water hole wore a film of algae and grime. A slippery grass embankment separated the irrigation ditch from the water hole. There was only one thing that moved there without the command of wind or wave. This was the catfish. It had lived in the pool of inseparable chemicals for a long time. Long enough so that some substance penetrated its brain or stomach and fostered an appetite for massacre. The catfish grew larger. It swam faster. The scimitar dorsal fin reached back to the stem of the tail. The whiskers became wiry and steely until they cut the water rather than obey its superior mass. Only the very tips of the whiskers yet wavered. Blood in its eyes, death on its mind, severed fins between its teeth, skinned fish tails skewered upon its whiskers, the catfish chased all neighboring species into oblivion, then nearly followed them there. Under the demands of its hunger, it even snuffed out the mussels and snails until there was no food left, and it would have perished there and there. It would have died like all the unknown deaths in each hunting season and on each hunting ground. None would have heard the legend. Perhaps in a universe where ultimate justice existed, it would have turned on itself, devouring its own meat by some trick of physics only attainable through its ravenous feats of hunger. Break its bones to swallow its tail. One last taste of flesh. But restless and hungry, the catfish did not die. The rains came. It was spring, and it poured for days on end. The water rose. The land flooded. In the swollen water hole, a spiky, bubble-lipped head broke the surface. And it happened. Yes, it really did. The catfish jumped the embankment. The catfish escaped. In the irrigation ditch, the muskrat beheld the gallery of teeth before the catfish tore the rodent out of the world. Then, on up the irrigation ditch, slicing through the water under log and root, seeking more lives to consume. Into the drainage pipe, into the dark, ashen eyes not mindful of the gloom, relentless against the same unknown that kept the edibles unwary in the pond at the pipe's distant end. The ignorant toads, frogs, and fish. The catfish swished out of the pipe and into the pregnant, precious green water of the pond. Nothing in the pond was the same thereafter. Initially, they didn't notice the change of eras because it came unannounced and under high water. They first became aware of it as an emptiness rather than a presence. An empty lily pad, an abandoned burrow in the bank, bones without flesh. The catfish was gone. The sewer fish had arrived. Then I got a old ghost story here. This is a short, self-contained story from Old Ghost Stories. It's called The Stump. As soon as you step outside, you'll be arrested by the searing cold. Droves of fat white flakes will be floating to the earth. They'll first come without a hint of sound or haste. But having not been home for so long, you forgot that it storms here rather than snows. I bet you also forgot how the winds, when they do arrive, bluster rather than blow. Or maybe you didn't forget, just purged them from your minds. Perhaps you borrowed recollections of the way the icicles grow from the dangling roots of the upturned oak stump, like the lashes of a massive dark eye blinking out of the white landscape. Can't forget about that old oak stump. We never saw it upright, did we? We never saw the trunk and the branches and the leaves and the shapes the tree took in its 4 seasons. Just the stump. Just a toppled and trapped stump. Half in the earth and half in the air with all its broken, twisted roots casting about the forest. Though tipped over, the base stood taller than us as children, and probably still stands as tall as us now. The tree must have been a colossus. We can only imagine how it might have once appeared, green, tall, and proud, proclaiming, "Look at me, I am life." But we only ever saw a half moon of sad and decaying wood, crowned by roots which remain disrobed in winter to remind us of the dark permanence lying beneath the snow. You were always scared to pass it alone on our way to the pond, even though the gradient of the slope seemed to push the pond toward us. It broadened and waxed below until we stood on the ice itself and the exposed plain surrounded us. The trees offshore punctured the winter's garb as markers of the water's limit. In the center of the saplings, we stood on a clean and smooth plate, perhaps only blemished by the imprints of birds' feet. Down there on the pond, beyond the shadows of the shaven trees on the shoreline, amid the haze of your quick breath, you can feel the winter at its most brutal. Funny how in that small notch within the ridge, where the pond nestles like a forgotten teardrop, the winter's cruelest winds collect and wrap around each other like a ball of breathing snakes. The chill puts its eye on you when you step upon the sheet of ice, and the howling communion of currents disdains your very presence. How the wind can rage down there. It must be some trick of the looming slope around the pond. Wailing in and out, coming and going, staying for a while to hammer at your ears. I'd always be waiting for you in the center of the pond, and I'd ask you why you'd fallen behind. Our brother would come up and say it was because of the oak stump again. You couldn't stand to walk by the oak stump alone. And our brother and I would laugh because he knew no matter what excuse you made, it was always because of the oak stump. While I was busy plodding ahead to the pond, you'd always wait for a younger brother to catch up before you crossed the stump's path. You'd get so angry that you'd spit at our brother because he was braver than you, and because he always told the truth when I asked him why you had taken so long to reach the pond. I'd call you both girls for lagging so far behind, and you'd tell me to shut up, and then our brother and I would keep on laughing. Shimmying out to the pond center, I'd watch the two of you. Derek spinning and gliding like he was on skates, and you slipping and tottering as you gave chase, gasping like an elderly man, while Derek puffed away like a steam train grinding out the terrain behind it. Now remember the time I grew bored, and I began back up the hill toward the oak stump, while you and Derek were still on the pond. You turned to follow, leaving our brother to his acrobatics, and the crack that you must not have heard spread its mouth out behind you, and Derek's hand clapped on your shoulder as you put one foot on the shore. I wonder what he said before you slapped his hand off your shoulder and scuttled away. Did he say anything after you turned around to see him, once your feet were on solid ground and your mind at ease? I never did get to hear those parting words, though I feel I'm entitled to them. Remember them well, for you were even more entitled to them than I. You learned not to fear the oak stump that afternoon. You flew by the hoary roots without a second thought. I never thought you were capable of moving so fast. That is how I knew something was amiss as soon as I heard the rapid crunching of your steps behind me. I'd scarcely mounted the ridge and broken the edge of the forest, and yet it was too late when the knowledge came to me. It was only you who had the leeway, you who had the time, and passed through it, leaving him behind. How you can think of anything else when you go home, I do wonder. I would think you would do nothing else but recall the old oak stump, the hidden pond, and your youngest brother.